Now, this is pretty interesting. We've gone from a video where I think a lot of people may have overly understood my opinion about the game and why I scored it the way I did, to a game where I think not as many people are going to understand why I scored it the way I did. So, Chapter 3, just as a brief recap for people who don't want to watch my video, I had significant concerns about accessibility. It seemed like from the way that Chapter 3 was presented that Toby had had a significant shift from Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is the height of which Deltarune has ever hit. It was the most accessible to casual players. It was very accessible to challenge runners. It had multiple deviations with content. And I applaud it for taking two of the most annoying characters or most basic characters that I thought were in Chapter 1 and making them into some of the most interesting characters narratively for purposes of Chapter 2. It really and opened up so many theories and ideas as to what the future chapters may hold. And I think any other game being able to reach the levels of Chapter 2 is probably not going to happen after playing Chapter 3. Toby has demonstrated he is willing to alienate audiences in terms of his casual audience by introducing a ranking system that is necessary in order to get certain secret fights and lore information accessible to you. And he's indicated that he doesn't really cater to the challenge community either. We still don't have a cutscene skip. We still do not have ways to get through areas without force damage, as Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, as of the time of recording this video, have force damage elements to them. And a twin ribbon, one of the most lauded items that we had been cheering about, and being able to even get access to a second one by winning a pink ribbon and white ribbon in Chapter 3, is significantly nerfed in utility in Chapter 4 because so many fights in Chapter 4 change how you gain TP, to where the item is no longer really helpful and you don't really feel very accomplished by having Chris wear them. So there's a lot of features that I think if I were scoring this game as a challenge runner, as a no-hitter, or as somebody who was wanting to do multiple different routes, like for no-hitting purposes, I would not have arrived at the final score I did. I would have probably been along with the majority of people who said, I'm not a fan of Chapter 4. But I am a fan of Chapter 4. I do like Chapter 4. I actually think it is the second best chapter behind Chapter 2, but it is never going to hit those heights of accessibility, of world building, of character development, and just overall feel that Chapter 2 does. That was Toby's best writing, and I don't think we're ever going to hit that again. And so I want to go ahead and explain my thoughts overall about Chapter 4 without choking myself in this wire, apologies there, and just kind of let people know where I stand on the spectrum. Let's start on the light world, because the light world is one of the biggest divisive areas, because people were sleeping like Toriel in Chapter 3 when they went through the light world. It was an absolute menace of a section that was longer than Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 light world stuff combined. So how did I feel about it? I liked it. Want to know why I liked it? Because in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, the light world sections that you dealt with were always at the end of the game. And to me, as a casual player, I did not like that. Because when I fight the final boss of a world, and I get ready to seal a fountain like I did in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, I don't want to go around and run around and do a bunch of setup in the light world for 20 to 25 minutes, exhausting all conversation trees. And in the case of Chapter 2, doing exactly the same thing, and then going to the Dark World, and then going to Castletown, and then doing all the things in the dojo, and then getting a tension gem, and then leaving, and 40 minutes passing since the time you thought you beat the game, and hadn't actually beaten the game. I felt that was the most exhausting way to do it. And if you missed, oops, I forgot to do Onion Sen in Chapter 2, you gotta beat the entire game again? And you gotta go back to that section and do it? What a mess. I really did not like that as a casual player. So Chapter 3, the way that it ended, basically forcing Chapter 4 to begin in the overworld section, I thought was a breath of fresh air for me. I enjoyed running around and talking to the characters a lot. It was fun seeing all of these characters outside of their native elements, being able to see them in church. I liked Caddy's #1 fan family, like with the foam finger in church. because previously we only saw them in the diner, and then also seeing them like cheering in the trees. It was a lot of fun. I did enjoy the Holiday Mansion section. I enjoyed the lore development, being able to see Chris in their native element, playing the piano without the soul's possession, the dialogue between Noelle and Susie, the hot chocolate conversation between Chris and Susie. There were a lot of good bits of dialogue that were in the overworld that I thought were extremely interesting to watch. I really did enjoy experiencing that game casually. Now, I will say there are a number of characters that were flanderized that was annoying to me. Asgore, very, very flanderized. And I don't know if it's because they're setting Asgore to be having a really, really sad Dark World in Chapter 5. It's heavily implied from Gerson's Lore of the Hammer discussion of Chapter 5 that there's going to be a section with the Field of Flowers, and there's prophecies about Asgore seeking asylum, to where I think that we're setting ourselves up for a very sad Dark World with him. I mean, we know from Chapter 2 he speaks to his flowers, so it's very likely that they're going to share all the things that Asgore has spoken to them about, and it's going to be very, very sad and depressing. And maybe if I want to have a little shred of faith in Toby's writing still, that might be why we're getting so much flanderization of him. And if that's the case, fine. But let's talk about Birdley. Like, Birdley, I felt, should have left the Chapter 2 Dark World looking at, like, a better character than before he went in it. He was arguably worse, like, talking about, like, this polyamory harem of people interested with him in the festival, like, whenever he called Noelle. I thought it was, like, a huge step back for his character. Yes, he was having this internal struggle in the library earlier, but, like, it obviously didn't matter, because that scene still happened. And speaking of polyamory, why is Toby pushing that so much? We had so many scenes in 3 and 4 about polyamory, like with Rules and the Weather Duo, and Rules and the Weather Duo again in Chapter 4 with the lampshade attack, and both of them reacting to the lampshade and saying, I'm thinking about the person who used the lampshade. And then all of this dialogue with Birdley, and then the Chris, Susie, Noelle, not to mention the Ralsei Susie, Ralsei Chris aspects of Chapter 2 that were explored, and it's just like, there's just so much polyamory. It seems like everybody's being paired with everybody, and I'm not necessarily against polyamory, but I'm just like, it seems to be very heavily on display on 3 and 4, and it comes narratively almost seemingly out of nowhere. But overwhelmingly, I liked the Light World sections. I enjoyed the conversations. I enjoyed having rekindled life into theory crafting and speculating as to what's going to happen into future chapters that Chapter 3 unfortunately lost for us. Now, let's talk about the Dark World, because that's the other big section. I liked the Dark World, and I liked it a lot. I enjoyed how wide open and expansive they were, further added by the inclusion of climbing elements, meaning that certain areas were even more wide open than ever. I enjoyed being able to run through and explore these different areas. I enjoyed interacting with a number of the Dark World, and the aesthetic was just beautiful. Music was great. It was so much more visually interesting than going through Chapter 3's boring Dark World. I'm sorry, but Chapter 3 aesthetically was boring visually. Tenna was, of course, a very visually interesting character, but the world itself was dull. The back rooms, the green room, like, none of it was that visually appealing or great to me. But Chapter 4 was just visually a delight. I do think they unfortunately hurt themselves by using climbing way too much, especially for the escape sequences. I say sequences plural. There was more than one where you had to use the climbing gear to escape, and those sections were about twice as long as they realistically needed to be. So I had some difficulties with that particular inclusion, just because I felt it was done too long. The old man, hands down, best part of Chapter 4. Well, maybe second best behind Chris playing the piano for like 8 minutes, but Gerson themselves was a huge delight. I enjoyed all of his acts, all of his dialogue, and his boss fight is second only to Jevil, which still holds the distinction and crown of being the best secret boss fight in terms of accessibility to both a challenge and casual audience. I don't know if Gerson quite ticks all of the bosses for a casual player, but it certainly does for a challenge audience. So I think it is, in my opinion, the second best secret boss fight we've ended up having. Mic is not good. I hated using the microphone for any sort of a boss fight. Just a bad, bad fight. But that doesn't hurt its score overall. But the Dark World itself, I enjoyed running through. I enjoyed its music. It was very, very beautiful and interesting. Now, the Titan was the biggest letdown I could have possibly imagined. I am not a fan of introducing a plot element only to immediately solve that plot element instantly. And that's what the Titan was. It was this thing that was built up in Chapter 2, but it wasn't there yet because we heard about the roaring. And then, oh no, the knight opened a fountain within a fountain, and here's a Titan now, and then we beat the Titan. I mean, obviously I'm being a little bit reductive just for dramatic emphasis, but that's in essence what we did. We beat the Titan, albeit with a little help from Gerson, almost as instantly as it happened. I would have either liked for us to not have beaten the Titan, or have needed to have somehow escaped from the Dark World knowing there was a looming threat of a Titan we had to face later. The problem is when you set Chapter 3's final fight as being the Knight, everything seems lesser in intensity and severity as a consequence, because that Titan had nothing on the Knight in terms of difficulty. The Knight was outclassed the Titan by many, many leagues. And so that was kind of a narrative letdown. I didn't think that even though the chapter was long, I didn't feel put off and bored, and I'm like, come on, just end already. Casually, I didn't have that experience with this. I did have that experience with 3, however. I did want it to end multiple times, and starting with the rounds and the ranking and everything else was kind of a mess. But Chapter 4, I think it brought back some of its casual friendliness. I still think the challenge running community, no-hitting community, is still going to be in complete shambles as of the way that Toby has coded this game, the lack of playtesting, lack of cutscene skip, and the force damage. It's all still clearly not going to be addressed. I would have been amazing if the people that Toby had playtesting these games actually had a challenge running background, actually had a no-hitting background, could actually get involved behind the scenes in making these games better in that regard. But I don't know if Toby has any interest in that. I really don't. I don't think he does. After seeing Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, think he does. And so I don't think this is the universally accessible game. As much as I will defend it and advocate that it is a must-play game casually, I don't think it is an everybody game in terms of accessibility. I would encourage people to play it, but it is still going to be gate-capped. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 have set a new floor in terms of difficulty and what people are going to be able to experience from here on out, and have set a certain expectation and taste in the mouth of people that have challenge run. And I don't think that's going to be fixed by Chapter 5, unless Toby really is serious about having people in the challenge running no-hitting community on board on his team. Because I can guarantee you nobody was, or he would not have had 3 and 4 be the way that it was. But thanks, everybody. That is my thoughts about Chapter 4, my long-awaited thoughts. So I hope all of you have a good rest of your day and a good rest of your weekend.